what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The U.S. involvement in Vietnam lasted more than 10 years. We lost over 58,000 service people there. The graphic details of this war were brought directly to American homes, courtesy of Walter Cronkite and the Evening News. This was the first truly televised war. Because of this publicity and a lack of clearly defined military objectives, many Americans became incensed. They questioned the U.S. involvement in a war that did not have clearly defined objectives other than to stop the spread of communism. Young men were being drafted into military service and going off to war to die. Protests spread across the country. On college campuses across the nation, young people held organized demonstrations. The most prominent anti-war group was the Students for Democratic Society. Their activities and publications fueled the anti-war movement. In October of 1967, 100,000 protesters gathered at the Lincoln Memorial for an anti-war demonstration. Later that evening, 30,000 people marched to the Pentagon and were met by federal marshals determined to protect the military installation. A brutal confrontation ensued and hundreds of protesters were arrested. This was the beginning of 4 years of confrontation between protesters and the U.S. government. The power of the media in the U.S. to sway the outcome of the war was certainly understood by the North Vietnamese government. In January 1968, the North Vietnamese launched the Tet Offensive. They had little success against the U.S. and South Vietnamese troops, but the greatest damage they inflicted to the U.S. war effort was what was seen on the evening news. The troops in the field knew that they had won the battle and suppressed the enemy offensive, but the story being told at home was quite different. Only scenes of U.S. casualties were being shown on the news reports. The enemy death toll was very high, but very little was made of that in the newscast. Watching scenes of death and destruction and seeing the U.S. death toll rise fueled the anti-war movement. Even some Vietnam War veterans joined the anti-war movement. It truly was a dark time in American history. President Lyndon Johnson decided not to run for a second term because of the conflict and division in our nation caused by the war. He thought that if North Vietnam did not think he was trying to end the war for political reasons, that would be more agreeable to settling for peace. Sadly, he was wrong about this assumption. In the midst of all the turmoil and controversy at home, young men on the battlefield still carried out their duty and served their government. Many heroic stories are told about their efforts to defeat an almost invisible enemy. Part 2 of our movie deals with the brave men who manned the riverboats. They were called the Brown Water Navy.
This is the American Forces Vietnam Network.
Sometimes I get so wet I can hardly sleep at night. Seen some things have been happening, yeah, that don't make me feel right. But then my baby came over and said she had some news for me. She said, wait a little while, then I'm sure you'll see. Yeah, I did all she said, took heed to her advice. But I soon found out, yeah, she was selling for the price. So I decided that to like the cat.
As you know, 3 weeks ago, the enemy launched an offensive across all of South Vietnam. We're calling this offensive Tet because it commenced on the beginning of the Vietnamese Lunar New Year, which was supposed to be a ceasefire period. It has taken us a couple of weeks, but we have gained control of most of the regions the enemy had made headway in. Now it's a matter of cleaning up and holding our ground. I'm going to read this message from Commander Naval Forces Vietnam, then you will know what the situation is as it stands now. From Commander Naval Forces Vietnam. The NVA-VC have taken a disastrous beating and heavy losses over Tet. They are undoubtedly in a state of confusion and disorganization. Urge all units to take advantage of the situation to further disrupt and destroy the enemy and carry out widespread war campaigns, emphasizing the enemy's recent defeats, losses, and the hopelessness of their efforts. Although the enemy has been very active and has taken a terrific beating the last few days, he is still capable to initiate further attacks. For this reason, you are encouraged to take offensive action against a mauled and disorganized enemy. Of course, precaution should be maintained against possible new attacks, especially in those areas where action has been relatively quiet to date. Okay, you heard the man. We're stepping up patrols. We're going to press the advantage. It sounds like we have Charlie on ropes. Now let's go in for the knockout punch.
How are you, G.I. Joe? It seems to me that most of you are poorly informed about the going of the war, to say nothing about a correct explanation of your presence over here. Nothing is more confused than to be ordered into a war, to die, or to be maimed for life, without the faintest idea of what's going on. Isn't it clear that the war makers are gambling with your lives, while pocketing huge profits?
This is the radio Pasadena.
You're listening to Radio Lai Key, South Vietnam.
Here's a lavish race record from the past.
Hit Radio Live TV.
Roger, you received me loud, clear? Roger, you received me loud, clear? Go on, let somebody answer that call. Okay, if you're going to talk to Mike, get your feet down the bunkers into a uniform. I've been calling for 5 minutes.
Grid 734-536. Direction 4800. Right 600. Drop 400. Distance 2100. Fire when ready. Over.
This movie does not pretend to be a history lesson, but we have based it on actual historical events. Our purpose is not to glorify or protest war, but to enlighten a younger generation of what people went through that lived during the years of the Vietnam War. Whether we were in the military or living our lives out at home, this war and all the controversy around it changed our lives and our country. We are deeply indebted to all of those who wear the uniform for our country and those who serve to preserve our democracy.